Imani and Noelle met in a freshman seminar at a small college in Maryland, where the professor opened the course by putting a silk scarf on the table and asking what it meant. Everyone said fashion, status, Paris. Imani said story, and Noelle, without looking away, said protection. After class, they swapped opinions over cafeteria waffles, critiqued each other's outfits with deadly kindness, and somehow, between the library stacks and late-night thrift runs, drew a line around themselves that felt like a country. They graduated into a world that looked almost ready for them. Both landed jobs at Aurelia and Company, a buzzy fashion house with a DC showroom and a Baltimore studio. Imani, precise and persuasive, took brand partnerships. Noelle, a moodboard poet with a surgeon's eye, joined the design team as an assistant. They found a 2-bedroom in Mount Vernon with high windows and creaky charm. 1 parlor, 1 kitchen, 2 doors to 2 worlds. Noelle's room dripped with prints and plants. Imani's was colder, all lines and light, a muted palette punctuated by lipstick on a tray. They moved like a little engine. Work, gym, showroom fittings. Collabs and coffee-fueled deadlines. Their coworkers slipped into their lives and weekends. There were rooftop hangs in Shaw, after-work play dates, that were really decompression sprints with laughs as loud as the music. They watched trends and invented small ones. Lace-up sandals in March because Maryland weather can be bullied. A sharp bob for Imani that made her cheekbones a rumor and a truth. Cinnamon brown wigs for Noelle that turned every hallway into a runway. Dating, of course, threaded the calendar. They downloaded the apps, swiped in parallel, traded screenshots and criteria. Imani met Marcus on a Thursday and texted Noelle that he knew the difference between satin and charmeuse, which felt promising. Noelle matched with a teacher who loved sculpture, then a dental hygienist with the kindest eyes, and then no one for a while because work thundered. Through it all, they treated each other like home, reminders for each other's deadlines on their phones, floating calendars that somehow blended. My fitting at 2, Imani would say. Our fitting at 2, Noelle would correct with a grin. When Imani and Marcus clicked into something official, the group cheered. He was sweet, ambitious, steady. He showed up with flowers that weren't clichés and compliments that didn't feel borrowed. But as the months braided together, he kept tripping over something invisible. I don't feel like a priority, he said once softly while they split fries after an event. I know you love me. Sometimes it feels like you and Noelle are the couple and I'm third-wheeling. Imani laughed it off at first, then defended, then rationalized. She and Noelle had history, rituals, a choreography. Of course they shared calendars. Of course she had reminders about Noelle's pitch deck and mother's birthday and dentist appointment. That's how we take care of each other, she said. Marcus nodded, but the arithmetic kept not working for him. That weekend she missed his cousin's barbecue after a shoot ran long and a zipper catastrophe became a whole case study. You could have texted me, he said. I did, she said. She had, Noelle had responded first. Life rolled forward. They worked. They excelled. They drove good cars with good music and came home to soft lamplight and the sound of the city trying not to sleep. And every so often on a Friday night they had movie night. Trending film, oversized popcorn, a couch that could hold their entire complicated friendship. One such night something shifted. The film was one of those glossy dramas with stakes that felt like couture, exquisite, narrowly stitched, dangerous if you pulled the wrong thread. Noelle wore a giant t-shirt and socks with tiny planets. Imani had on silk lounge pants and a head wrap that deserved a campaign of its own. They teased the movie, predicted the twist, and fell quiet when it turned tender. On the coffee table, the popcorn bowl bobbed between them. Their hands moved in time, a choreography they'd never practiced. When the score swelled, strings that made the night feel like it had a spine, the back of Noelle's finger grazed the side of Imani's hand. It was nothing. It was static electricity. It was a match taken out of the box and returned without striking. They both withdrew, laughing the way you laugh when your heart trips and you're trying to convince it you're fine. Except then it happened again, because life repeats itself when it's trying to tell you a secret. The hero confessed. The heroine didn't run. I'm scared of losing the person who teaches me who I am, their fingers bumped. Noelle turned her head. Imani did too. And in that small tilt lived the entire complication. The warmth of old summers, the gravity of the house they'd built, an ache that had no label, only direction. The kiss was quick, startled, soft. It tasted like salt and caramel and poor timing. They pulled apart at once, blinking. The room snapped back into its ordinary angles. The TV's rectangle, the couch's slope, the windows reflected neon. Imani stood like she'd been called to the stage, then shook her head and fled to her room. Noelle sat very still, then rose and walked to hers. Doors clicked. Hearts pounded. The movie kept playing to an audience of plants. Morning was a study in avoidance. 2 toothbrushes hummed at separate intervals. 2 mugs chimed against the counter but never at the same time. They left earlier than early, the front door closing behind each of them with diplomatic gentleness. Work greeted them with emails and samples and the safe pressure of tasks. They avoided each other like professionals, which is to say perfectly in public but awkwardly in the quiet places. At lunch, fate, also known as a broken coffee machine, herded them into the office kitchen. Noelle reached for the same paper cup as Imani and said, "Oh," and Imani said, "Sorry," and then both said, "Hi." There was a small, polite smile. There was weather commentary. There was nothing. A week passed. The ache didn't. It slipped into mundane moments. Noelle would be pinning a muslin when Imani laughed across the room at something a stylist said, and the sound would arrow through her. Imani would be outlining a partnership's deck and catch a glimpse of Noelle's profile in the conference room glass. Focused, generous, beautiful, and feel the strange warmth again. Neither named it. Neither shoved it entirely away. They returned to form. Movie night resumed, all pillows and opinions. They behaved. But the body keeps the truest calendar and theirs were counting down. Their cook night was an institution. Once or twice a month they tried recipes outside their comfort zones, Noelle reading from her phone like a sports commentator, Imani plating like a judge who could make or break your career. That night they chose Thai basil chicken and cucumber salad, a study in heat and cool. Music hummed from a speaker. Steam whispered. Noelle chopped vegetables, her knife a bright metronome. Imani worked the pan, coaxing sizzle from oil like it owed her rent. They talked about work, about a coworker's new sneaker collab, about Marcus, carefully. He'd asked again for time she didn't have. He'd wondered aloud whether love and priority were the same word. "They're not," Imani said, but she'd sounded unconvinced. The knife slipped, a tiny betrayal, a half-moon of red blooming at the tip of Noelle's index finger. She hissed, more startled than hurt. Before she could say, "It's fine," Imani was already moving, the pan off the flame, the first aid kit in her hands like a lifeline. "Sit," she ordered, voice low and shaking. Noelle sat on the stool, obedient, suddenly aware of Imani's breath, the citrus-clean smell of her wrists. Imani's hands were steady as she cleaned the cut. Noelle watched her lashes shadow and lift, watched tears gather then cling stubbornly to not falling. "It's small," Noelle said softly. "I know," Imani said, not looking up. "And I still hate it." She taped the bandage with the kind of care you could live inside. "Be careful," she added, and it was a prayer disguised as scolding. The room felt suspended, a bead of water before the drop. Noelle's good hand covered Imani's. Not to pull away, not to dramatize. To steady both of them. Imani looked up. The universe took 3 slow breaths. Then they kissed. There was nothing accidental about it this time. It was certain the way a color can be certain. No debate over whether it's navy or midnight, just blue at full truth. Heat flared but stayed kind. Urgency rose but remembered tenderness. They moved from the kitchen to the couch, speaking in the language of touch and "Are you okay?" and "Yes." They chose care every step. When the world narrowed to a door and then a bed, the camera in their minds cut tastefully to the window. City lights blinking like witnesses who knew how to keep a confidence. Morning arrived like someone whispering their names kindly. Noelle woke first to find Imani looking at her, not startled, not ashamed, just present. "Coffee?" Noelle asked, voice a smile. "Please," Imani said, answering with one. They made a gentle ritual of it. 2 mugs, 1 splash of oat milk, the quiet clink of spoons. They went to work writing a secret that didn't feel like hiding so much as holding something delicate until it could live in the air. For a week, their days remained disciplined. Emails answered, samples approved, meetings led with excellence. Their evenings, though, became their favorite chapter. A cookbook expanded to include laughter in the margins, the deep exhale of being seen, kisses that tasted like beginning. Imani texted Marcus less than not at all. She told herself she needed time to understand what she was choosing before she said it out loud. Noelle paused her dating apps, not with grim certainty but open curiosity. If this was a doorway, she wanted to keep both hands free. They didn't call it anything yet. They called it us. Secrets create draft. You don't notice until the temperature changes. One evening, a week into their new orbit, they were curled on the couch. A movie paused at some luminous frame, their laughter a soft thing in the space. The front door swung open. Marcus stood there, fury and hurt braided tight. He'd used the spare key for the first time. He saw enough, the distance between them, which was none, the pause on Imani's lips, the warmth that felt like visible light. "I knew it," he said, voice breaking. "I knew I was always second to your best friend. I just didn't know she was this." Imani sat up, heart ramping. "Marcus, don't," he said. "Don't do the speech. Don't tell me I'm misreading the calendar you've been sharing with her since college, or the dinners you've skipped, or the way your eyes look when she walks into a room." He laughed once without joy. "Worst thing a man can imagine, right? You didn't leave me for another guy. You left me for—" He stopped himself, swallowing the insult he was about to say. He wasn't cruel, he was collapsing. Noelle stood. "This isn't an attack on you," she said carefully. "It's not a competition someone won. But I lost," he said. He looked at Imani with something like pleading. "Did I?" Imani took a breath that hurt. There are moments when kindness is a straight line and moments when it's a curve. She chose the line. "Yes," she said, voice shaking but clear. "I don't know how to make this easy or fair. I can only make it honest. I care about you. I do. But I'm choosing something else. I'm choosing her. I'm also choosing to figure myself out, and that's part of it." Marcus stared at her for a long beat. He nodded once, the nod of a man who had hoped for denial and got truth instead, and respected it even as it burned. He set the spare key on the entry table. "Then choose all the way," he said. "Don't let me be the reason you do it halfway." He left, the door closing behind him with a sound that took some air with it. Silence sat with them. The paused movie felt obscene. Noelle touched Imani's knee. "You okay?" "Ask me again in an hour," Imani said, trying to smile and almost making it. Noelle did what she does best, made space and tea and a nest of blankets. Grief for what had been and relief for what might be shared the couch, elbows bumping. The days that followed were complicated but not unkind. Marcus texted once to say he'd be okay and then stopped texting. Imani cried on a run and in the shower and once in the cereal aisle because life has a sense of humor. Noelle met her in each place with a hand on the shoulder or a dumb joke or a silence that wasn't empty. At work, they were excellent as always. The office noticed nothing, except maybe that their work got even cleaner, that their pitches carried a new clarity, that they looked lit from within. One night, they sat at the kitchen table without music or screens. "I've always known I could love a woman," Noelle said, not as confession but as biography. "I didn't know if I would. Until you." Imani nodded, eyes wet. "I always assumed my life would be a straight line," she said. "Turns out I'm an S-curve." They laughed then didn't. "What do you want us to be?" Noelle asked. The question was a room, they walked into it together. "I want us to be real," Imani said. "Not a rebellion, not a secret hobby, not just a comfort. I want to choose you in daylight. I want a life." She paused. "And I want to be brave enough to tell the people who matter." "Okay," Noelle said and put her hand out. Imani took it. The room didn't get brighter. They did. Coming out isn't one act. It's a series of doors with different handles. They opened them as they could. Imani told her sister first, over FaceTime, a new steadiness in her voice. Her sister blinked, then smiled like she'd been waiting for a question that finally got asked. "Is she kind to you?" she said. "Yes," Imani answered. "Then congratulations." Noelle told her mother on a walk, hands in pockets, sentences careful and full. Her mother nodded slowly. "I always wanted you to have a life that matches your heart," she said at last. "This sounds like that." There were other conversations, more complicated, more layered. Not everyone applauded. But no one who loved them turned away. At work, the truth was less an announcement and more an atmosphere. They arrived together to the spring preview in matching undertones, Imani in bone and gold, Noelle in rich cocoa and cream, with a quiet, unmistakable ease. Colleagues clocked it and adjusted. A few head tilts, a few warm squeezes, a distinct lack of gossip. Aurelia and company cared about the product and the people making it. Scandal sells tabloid covers, not collections. Their careers, meanwhile, didn't pause for romance. Noelle pitched a capsule inspired by Baltimore row houses, brick and stoop and window light translated into structure and stitch. Imani landed a partnership with a heritage brand that wanted relevance without panic. She gave them a story that felt like respect. When the capsule showed, a local paper ran a photo of Noelle adjusting a sleeve, Imani in the background, eyes on the model, proud like gravity. Home, always their best runway, changed and stayed the same. The apartment gained more plants because Noelle said love should photosynthesize. Imani added a small bench at the entry for shoes and pauses. They shared more, closet space, calendar blocks labeled simply, us. The unglamorous inventory of real life. Groceries, dusting, budgets, Sunday soup. They kissed in the kitchen while rice steamed and in the hallway where their reflections could watch. Their intimacy stayed private and tender, the kind that respects the camera and the world but refuses to dim itself indoors. They also set rules because love without structure can float away. They promised to name jealousy instead of letting it leak. They kept one night a week to see friends separately, not to hide but to breathe. They agreed to argue early, kindly and with snacks. When Marcus texted months later to say he was dating someone new and wished them well, Imani closed her eyes and exhaled a chapter. Noelle kissed her temple. "Thank you for choosing all the way," she whispered. On a summer evening that felt like the city had decided to be kind, Aurelia and company hosted a rooftop event. Local artists, a live DJ, the capsule on rolling racks, the skyline practicing its angles. Imani and Noelle stood side by side, watching the models mingle with buyers. A young designer from another brand approached, starry-eyed. "Your work," she said to Noelle, "has bones? It stands up." She turned to Imani. "And your decks? Low-key poetry." They laughed, promised coffee, watched her vanish back into the crowd. As the sun slid toward copper, Imani took Noelle's hand. Noelle squeezed back then didn't let go. "Remember the scarf?" Imani asked suddenly. Noelle laughed. "Story and protection." They looked at the life they'd made, at the room where the old rules and the new promises both fit, and let the math speak for itself. Love had not replaced anything. It had multiplied. It had taken two best friends with excellent wigs and better hearts and given them a house that could hold everything. Ambition and tenderness, missteps and repairs, grief and joy, past and future, silk and steel. They went home to their 2 doors and 1 parlor and cooked basil chicken again, the bandage long gone but the lesson permanent. Later they queued up a movie and took their places on the couch. When their hands touched, they didn't flinch or pretend. They pressed their palms together like a seal and let the credits of the old version of their life roll while the new one began, lit softly from within.